the world's longest sled dog race. Yeah, there you go. It marks, so it's over on the right. You can see it better when we turn if you look out to your right. But it marks the Iditarod, which commemorates the 1925 Serum Run to Nome, Alaska, which Nome was hit with an epidemic of diphtheria, and 59 children were hospitalized and needed the serum, and the only way to get it to them was to mush it from relay teams of dogs. And Balto was actually the lead dog of the final sled dog team, and his picture was featured on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. He's the only dog to have ever done that, first for Oak Records, so it's kind of cool. And then as we move ahead to your left, there is the Eisenhower Alaska Statehood Monument. Eisenhower was the president when Alaska became a state on January 3rd, 1959. And in town we affectionately call it
Ike on a half shell.
Yeah, Ike on a half shell, because his head looks like a little pearl in a clam shell.
If the statue was, the monument was made in Washington, D.C., and they unwrapped it here in Anchorage, and when they unwrapped it, everyone went, what? So anyway.
Yeah, so at the time, there were 40,000 people living in Alaska as disenfranchised Americans.
So we voted in national elections, but because we were only a territory, we had no votes in the Electoral College, and therefore we had no votes. So just to give you an idea of how that worked, my mother-in-law voted for the first time in a presidential election when she was 18 in the lower 48. Married my father-in-law the next year, and they moved to Alaska. The next election in which her vote counted was the 1960 election between Kennedy and Nixon. So the Americans living up here went a very long time without having a voice in who could become president. So it was a big deal here in Anchorage. My husband was born and raised here in Anchorage, and tells me that they made a bonfire on the park strip that was 30 feet tall with wood, and everyone who had a horse brought their horse down to the park strip, and they made torches, and they rode around this bonfire throwing their torches in to light up this huge bonfire in honor of statehood. We're now here at Ship Creek, and this creek is very famous. It's right downtown Anchorage, and when your kids get out of school at 3:30, or like when you come home from work, you grab your kids, and then 10 minutes later they can be fishing. In this creek we have three major salmon runs. King salmon come the last 2 weeks of May. The largest king salmon ever caught in this stream was 41 pounds and was 5 feet tall. And you'll see right here, we're getting towards low tide. At low tide, those fish, half the fish is sticking out of the water. Now at high tide, this creek will go up to 45 feet. So you can, so we have a 34-foot tide drop every day here in the city of Anchorage. And you can see where the water level comes right here. It's the second largest tidal differentiation in North America, the first being the Bay of Fundy up in New Brunswick, Canada. The second run, we have a very small run of red salmon, the middle of June. And then the largest run of salmon will be over 70,000 silver salmon will come up the stream every summer. Once salmon hit the fresh water, they no longer feed. So in order to catch a salmon, you must know a technique called blinding the fish. When a salmon breathes, his gills open. And those gills opening, automatic muscle reflex opens his mouth as well. So I fish with a orange with a hook, a Gamakatsu hook with a piece of orange yarn around the end of it, and weight about 18 inches up. So you throw your line upstream and then you just let it drift down. If nothing happens, then you just flip it out. You only fish with 4 feet of line out. They're right next to the shore, down. But when your line stops in the water, your pole will be pointing upstream and your hook will be downstream. That means the line has gone through the mouth of a fish. So you snatch downstream and hook the fish. It has to be hooked in front of his gills in order to be a legal catch. If you hook him and try to keep him when it's behind the gills, you don't know who's on that river with you, and you could end up with a $500 fine. And mostly they do that to keep people from trying to snag all the time and hooking somebody, and we're very, very often does happen. one year I was teaching English 9, and they have to give a personal experience speech as part of the curriculum. And this little boy named Jody Spear, I'll never forget it. He said, "Yeah, well, I was fishing and I casted and I was casting and I hooked my dad through his ear." He was 8 years old, right? And so my mom came over and cut the hook out, and my dad said, "No, you go downstream and don't hurt anybody." "Yes, Dad." He says he went down like 14 feet to the other ear. He said he dropped his fishing pole and ran. That was his first experience speech. So the best time to fish in Alaska is to fish anywhere from July 19th to August 19th, because at that time the river is filled with all varieties of salmon. You will have in the same river, you will have kings, you will have reds, you'll be the second run of kings, the second run of reds, and then the first runs of the pinks and the silvers. So you get all these fish all at the same time. Amber and I, because we are Alaskan residents, we are able to fish in a method called dip netting. Now, at that point in time on the Kenai River, generally on somewhere between July 19th and July 21st, 250,000 red salmon will come up the Copper River in those 2 days. There's so many fish that the state of Alaska allows residents to fish with a big, huge 5-foot net. So you stand on the edge of the river. The net's generally about 4 to 10 feet long. The water is rushing downstream and hits boulders, and it back eddies. And when it back eddies, the fish run in that back eddy, because in other words, they're riding an escalator upstream. They don't have to fight the current. So your net is being pushed upstream. It's 10 feet long, and as you wait there, you wait, and all of a sudden your net starts going crazy. You lift it up, and there's a big fish. At my house, the record for the most number of fish in a net at any one time is my son Jaden, who caught 6 salmon in his net at the same time. That was 110 pounds of salmon in his net at one time. Right now we're coming to the Alaska Railroad, which is the whole reason why Anchorage is here as a town. In 1904, huge coal deposits were discovered in Alaska, the largest coal deposits in the world. And there was a rich market for that coal in the Orient if we could just get it there. The trouble was how to get it there. Now, logically, you would stick the coal on a barge and ship it to the Orient. There was a problem with that. Our harbor out here, 45 feet deep at high tide and 11 feet at low tide. And in 1904, barges could not float in 11 feet of water. They can now, but at that time, you had to have at least 15 feet of water. So rather than have the coal be high-centered for days at a time waiting for a higher tide, the decision was made to ship the coal out of the nearest deep water port, which was Seward, Alaska, about 118 miles away from here. Amber, I'm going to have you go back and open those back windows. Summer just started.
I know, yeah,
Summer just started. That was amazing. That's amazing. So let me get some air. They're all over Alaska. So following the building of the railroad, the line was completed down to Seward in 1916. And they began a second line up to Fairbanks, Alaska, which was going to be much more difficult because the terrain was much worse. When it was completed, President Harding was president, and since this was the only rail line in the United States to ever be built by the federal government, he thought it only fitting he drive in the final spike. So his whole Washington, D.C. entourage got tickets to cross country on the train to San Francisco and then to come up on a barge. So Harding asks his Army general here in Anchorage what they should all wear. The general says, "It's freezing cold even in the summers in Alaska. Wear wool. Wear everything wool." And it is cold here on the coastline. We very rarely get hotter than 73 degrees in the summertime. But he was going to the interior of Alaska, and on the day that Harding is to drive in that spike, it is 95 degrees. He swings the mallet 12 times before he finally hits it. The press corps would report that Harding was suffering from heat prostration. Folks, Alaskans will tell you the truth. President Harding was drunk. so anyway, just going to stop here for a moment. We can just barely see Denali right now. If you will look, it's kind of like a little mini museum. The hotel was built by Wally Hickel right after the earthquake. The smaller tower was built. And following the earthquake, 20,000 Americans left Alaska in the 2 weeks following the earthquake, never to return. This was an economic disaster like no one has ever seen. There wasn't any businesses starting. There wasn't anybody coming back to Alaska. There was really almost no hope. Wally Hickel took his entire construction company fortune and built that first tower in the hopes that he could inspire others to once again have faith in Alaska. No one did. He was on the verge of bankruptcy in 1969 when what miracle happened for Alaska? Oil came, and everybody came thundering back. He got all of his money back and then some, and he built the other towers, the hotel. He would eventually become our state governor, and then he served under Nixon in his cabinet as the Secretary of the Interior, and he was instrumental in arranging the agreement between the federal government and the Native Alaskans, because all of the oil was on their land, and nothing could be drilled until there was an arrangement. Each of our 5 major tribal groups got millions and millions of dollars. It was given to the tribal groups, and they had corporate finance, corporate leadership. The money was invested, and our Native Alaskans, our Cook Inlet tribal group here in Anchorage is the wealthiest one, and they've done well. If you are a Native Alaskan and you have good grades, you can go to Harvard completely on the dime of your Native group. If you can go to any school you want to, because they've they have made so much money and done well with it. So right now we're here at the park strip. Back in 1918, this is where Anchorage ended, delineated as the end of the city by the park strip. It's 1 block wide and 14 blocks long, and was originally built as a fire buffer zone to prevent forest fires from burning on this little town of Anchorage, Alaska. Eventually it was a small engine airport, then it became a golf course, then it was an airport and a golf course at the same time, giving new meaning to the word playing through, and eventually it's now the center of a lot of athletic activity here in Anchorage. In fact, the largest slow-pitch co-ed softball league in America is here in Anchorage. Over 10,000 men and women on co-ed teams play slow-pitch softball in the summer. And on June 21st, the longest day of the year, the sun will be up around the clock. We have our famous Midnight Sun Summer Solstice Softball Tournament. 50 teams enter. The games begin at midnight. Usually there's a winner by 7 o'clock in the morning. How do you go through a 50-team tournament in just 7 hours? Single elimination, 1-pitch softball. When you get up to bat, you only get 1 pitch. If it's a ball, you walk. If it's a strike, you're out. If you get a hit when you round first base, you're handed a can of Miller Lite beer. Who sponsors the tournament? You must drink it to score at home plate. 2 or 3 innings of this kind of softball. Nobody can hit anything, and the 2 teams that make it to that championship game at 6 o'clock in the morning are barely standing up. So forest fires in Alaska. Little known fact about Alaska, we have 360 million acres, and virtually every summer between 1 to 3 million acres of land burns somewhere in our state. Do you ever hear about Alaskan forest fires? No, but if a garage burns down in Los Angeles, it's all over CNN. The reason why is these forest fires are an essential part of our ecosystem. You see, the most important plant in Alaska is willow, and the willow tree grows for 7 years healthy, and then it starts to fade. So the leaves falling from the dense forest here in Alaska becomes fodder for lightning storms. 99.99% of all forest fires in Alaska are caused by lightning. It strikes these dry leaves, it will burn down 1 million acres, and what happens then, the willow tree is the first plant that revitalizes and comes up through this charred land. This is so very important because willow is the primary diet of moose. Moose eat 25 pounds of willow leaves a day in the summer and 25 pounds of willow bark a day in the winter. If we don't have the willow tree, we don't have any moose. If we don't have any moose, we don't have any wolves or bears. So it is essential to have these forest fires. And the forest fires here in Alaska are forest fighters, go all over the United States. They're very skilled forest fighters. They're always helping out California when they have their fires. Way fun, way fun. Oh yes, every high school team has a hockey team. All of the teams from Fairbanks, all the schools from Fairbanks below have hockey teams, but Fairbanks up is too cold. They can't cut the ice. The ice won't cut. Well, this lagoon will only go down about 10 feet with the tide, because it backwashes. Out there where they built the railroad, there's big culverts that go out to the inlet, and it backwashes. So part of the day, this is salt water, and the other part of the day it's fresh water. And the only fish in this pipeline, the odds were good, but the goods were a little odd back in the day. So we have 5 major tribal groups in Alaska. 4 of them would anciently build their homes in the Arctic underground for added insulation. These underground homes were called baraberas. Every tribal group had a different name for their underground home, but I can't say the others because you have to be able to glottal stop to be able to talk in your throat here. This is a modern day underground home built by the Isaacs family in 1985, completely underground. This home is 2,100 square feet. There are 14 steps that lead to their front door. There's Mrs. Isaacs right there. She's on my tour and she's very nice about it. The 2 skylights you see are the only 2 windows in the back 1,000 square feet of her home. The house goes down for 3 floors. She does have windows on the 3rd side, but the dirt goes up to the bottom of the windows on all 3 levels. It maintains a year-round temperature of 65 degrees without them having to heat the home. She says she's never had to spend more than $85 to heat her home, even in minus 20-degree weather. So very efficient way to build a home in the Arctic. The Isaacs do, however, have to mow their roof. So that's a disadvantage having an underground house. So what do homes cost in Anchorage? I hope we don't give any of you a heart attack from Alabama and Montana. But this home to the left of us, this little green home, is a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, split-level home with a family room downstairs on a city lot of 10,000 square feet. Homes of this nature in Anchorage right now are selling between $470,000 and $550,000. Now, if you're from Alabama, you're probably going, oh my gosh, how could anybody afford a house in Anchorage? But if you're from San Francisco, you're going, oh my gosh, let's buy 2. Well, the prices are so good. Homes in Anchorage are very much more expensive than previously, because Anchorage is out of land. Now that sounds crazy in a state that has 360 million acres, but we are boxed in by the 8,000, 10,000 foot tall Chugach Mountains on our east side. The rest of your building is going back and forth like this, swaying some 15 feet. Okay, can you hear me on the trolley? Can you still hear me? Yeah. Yes, you can hear me. Okay, good. All right, good. Okay. All right. So go ahead, Amber.
All right. So right here is actually the line of the northern plate and the Pacific plate, the tectonic plates. So that's why. So they collided and one subducted, right? So it goes underneath, and that just causes this rippling effect. You can actually see it like it's frozen time, like in the ground is like goes up and down, up and down. So those are the surface waves that went through the earth, and then it kind of almost like it stopped and it just kept going down, right?
So that line down there used to be level with where we're standing right now. So this is area itself. There's actually a little further than my part. So because of this was the original created friction that was so hot that it melted the subsoil. When this happened, it's called liquefaction. That's the same thing that destroyed the town of Christchurch in New Zealand, same exact thing. So up and down and up and down because it collided, lifting and dropping. So the mantle here was literally pushing the homes this direction. On the bluff, dozens of homes slid off into the water that night. Now, if you want to take a good picture of the skyline of Anchorage, this is a good place to do it. If anybody, photographers? Okay. Anybody? Okay. From here we can see 3 mountain ranges. These are the Chugach Mountains here. The mountains there are the Talkeetnas, and this is the Alaska Range. Now, okay, I'm just gonna pull over here. Now, the mountain you see that looks like a turtle, that's Mount Fouracre. And Fouracre is the third tallest mountain in North America. Next to it, what's behind this thing, in a minute we'll just move over. Sir, can I just move forward 3 feet? Can
Mike.
you, Mike? Yeah, no, you stay there. I'm just gonna move forward 3 feet, okay? Okay. So, so there's Fouracre, and right next to it, behind the clouds, so you see that big white base? That's the base of Denali, right there. So, and she's the tallest mountain in North America. Now, between Denali and Fouracre is Mount Whitney in California. She's the second largest mountain in North America. Okay, so you can see the tide is going way out. This would, in Alaska, we call this a clamming tide because you can go so far out and catch clams, but not here. You have to go a little further down the inlet.
So when it was McKinley, I'm assuming that was because of President McKinley?
Yes, it was President McKinley got assassinated, and so to honor him, he never came to Alaska or anything. Suddenly Congress named it Mount McKinley. Then the native Alaskans spent a good century trying to get it changed back to its original name, which is Denali. Denali in the Athabaskan language means the Great One, which makes a much better name, and it's a prettier name too. I had so many girls in my classes named Denali. You know that Alaskans like to name their little girls Denali. So finally, when Obama came here during the G2 summit in 2008, he changed the name back to Denali, and virtually all Alaskans were happy about that. But for those of us in my age group, it's hard to quit saying McKinley. I'm trying really hard to not say McKinley, but okay. So now this is the portion where we look for moose. You've already seen 3 of them. We're gonna pull over here, and this is gonna be. We are in calving season right now. Did you see there were 2? Was one a calf?
Something was laying down, something was laying
Well,
down.
this is calving season. It's early. Oh no, these are 2 adults. These are 2 adults. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. They're laying down, and those are twins born last year. So it looks like it's a brother and a sister. Let me see the brother. He's got little stubs for horns, and you can tell how young they are by how much they weigh. They barely weigh, 300, 400 pounds. They will be way bigger later on. Let me see. They don't like my bell. Whoops. They don't like my bell. Hold on. There you go. Okay.
So have they been living in there, in the airport?
Oh, well, they can hop that fence like no other. They have a 12-foot vertical leap, so they're over there. That fence is supposed to keep them out. But this is the terrain they like. They like this permafrost because they like to be in an open field. They like to be in that soggy, muddy, because wolves have a hard time running here, and they have a 12-foot vertical leap at 25 horizontal leap. So in this terrain, they can outrun a wolf. Once it freezes, the wolf is faster than they are. So they like to have big open spaces. And so these little twins are brother and sister. And you know what's happening? See, the mother will deliver her new calf. Calving begins May 15th to June 3rd. So what she has done is she has bitten and came walking out of the garage with 2 lit Roman candles. Fireworks are shooting out of the garage door. We're lucky the house didn't burn down. The moose runs away, her calves run away. I throw my arms around him. Jaden, you are the smartest little boy. You just saved my life. His response, I know, and I have $5. Mother's Day on Sunday, that's what I'm worth. $5. So we are now here at Lakehood and Lake Spenard, small engine aircraft airport, the largest small engine aircraft airport in the entire world. Ladies and gentlemen, if you take all of the small engine aircraft in the United States and put them in one big pile, divide the pile in half, 50% of the planes live in Alaska. And of the 50% that live in Alaska, divide that in half, 25% live in Anchorage. So you are now looking, in our neighborhood here, you're looking at 25% of all the small engine aircraft in the United States. Why is it so popular? Amber will tell you. Amber, why do they have those little houses next to the lake? What's that for?
Yeah, so those houses are they're for the fuel, their equipment, and they're also where the husbands sleep when they don't tell their wives that they bought a plane. The doghouse, right?
They call them doghouses. So, why are there so many plains in Alaska? We have no roads. We will never have roads because of the permafrost that we just described to you. So what happens, when you go to build a road in Alaska, you have to dig up all of that permafrost, and that permafrost can be 8 to 12 feet deep. There are places in Alaska where it's 1,000 feet deep. So you dig up all that ice, you backfill with gravel. It makes a road in Alaska 10 times more expensive to build than anywhere else in the continental United States. So very expensive to build roads here in Alaska.
That plane is
Yeah. So 2/3 of Alaska is completely inaccessible by any other means than an airplane. You can't get there by boat. There are no roads. You can get there by dog sled and plane, and that's it. And so, okay, it looks like he's turning off his engine, so I guess we'll be okay. Now, there are 650 slips, just like it's called a slip, just like a boat slip, on the lake. There's 2,500 planes around the lake. There's another 20,000 planes throughout the city of Anchorage. So we have tons of planes in our immediate area. This is controlled by the International Tower at Ted Stevens International Airport. One side of the tower controls the International Airport. This side controls this little airport here. We average 300 to 600 takeoffs and landings a day at the Lakehood, Lake Spenard Small Engine Aircraft Airport. As we come around, we'll be looking at some of the planes that are most prevalent here in Alaska. I was going to tell you one other thing about flying, now I can't remember it. Anyway, the two kinds of planes that are most common in Alaska is the Super Cub and the Cessna. So we're going to pull over here so you can see one of each. This little Super Cub is the preferred plane for most Alaskan pilots, even though it only suits 2 people. You notice that it has big, huge, fatty Tundra tires on it. These Tundra tires allow this plane to land on sandbars, gravel bars, beaches, on ground cover that is low. So in tundra-like areas, it's a perfect vehicle for trying to get out to hunt caribou. And also ptarmigan. Our state bird is called the ptarmigan. It's a little white bird. It tastes kind of like it tastes like chicken, but a little bit cross between chicken and duck. It's got darker meat. So this plane is so amazing. So they put on the brakes. They rev up the engine to full RPMs. They drop the flaps, and when they let go of that brake, it goes up like a kite. And the reason being is it is a kite. Look at the wings, pulling red salmon out of the float, at the storage area that floats. And they brought it on board so everybody could see their salmon. And I said, "Did you guys really fish in your floats?" He says, "Oh, we fished off the pontoons. Our wives wanted salmon for dinner. We flew across the inlet. We got out there. Now we're going." It's just like, so they fly all the time. This is a really good place to take a picture of the Chugach Mountains. Chugach in Athabaskan means rainmakers. Our natives understood thousands of years ago these mountains cause our rainfall here. They're like a gigantic funnel. The weather blows in off the Gulf of Alaska. It gets trapped between here, and then it rains. Yeah, I hear somebody, but I don't see him. I'm looking for Amber. Tell them a story about that little house over there.
Oh yeah, so
funny.
If you look over there across the lake, you see kind of a hotel right on the lakefront, and then there's some construction right in front of it. And the hotel thought, they owned all the property in the lakefront, but a man, he realized that there was a patch of land right on the lakefront that the hotel didn't own, and so he bought it, and he's building his own house right in front of that hotel. And we think that's his plane right in front of it, so he obviously, he wanted the best spot on the lake. He didn't care.
Isn't that funny? That is so, think about how much money he tried to extort out of that hotel to give up that spot. But anyway, so how many pilots are there in Alaska? My brother-in-law tells me 1 out of every 20 Alaskans has a license to fly. And then he always says, yeah, but that's not how many people are actually flying. In these remote villages, 800 miles away from Anchorage, you don't go and, you don't come into Anchorage to go to flight school. Grandma taught you how to fly the family plane because that plane's been out there for 50 or 60 years. Now, to get a pilot's license, you can get your learner's permit at 14 times taking my kids out to college and then flying outside to meet them and flying back with them in the summers. This road was amazing. One battalion was in the Yukon Territory, the other in Fairbanks, and simultaneously the road was built in 2 different directions. These men would build a 1,200-mile road over the most inhospitable land in North America in just 18 months. When it was done, both battalions came here. They were honored for having done this, and as a direct result of the positive influence of these military men, in 1953, the Territory of Alaska passed the first anti-discrimination laws in the United States. You see, those young men working from the Yukon into Alaska was the first all-African-American battalion of Seabees in military history. So we had this small part to play in the civil rights movement. And folks, I want to tell you, the greatest adventure you would ever have is to drive that Alaskan highway. The road is good now. The last time, one of our drivers that came up last summer saw 30 bear en route to Alaska on that Alaskan highway. So don't be afraid to come back and visit us and take a tour. Take up the Alaskan highway. Folks, 1 out of every 3 Alaskans makes a portion of their living from tourism, if not all of their living. So thank you so much for coming with us, because if you don't come here, we don't get to live here year round. Have a wonderful rest of your journey here in the city of Anchorage.